Hey, welcome back to Night School. Back with Justin Brown. I'm just going to call him Man of Mystery. Daniel Babcock, Ignatian educator, and Wes Chance, a wonderful porch hanger outer on no stoic. I guess I should say you are maybe peripatetic even, but public school educator certainly is.
Stoic.
Stoipathetic, exactly. Though we don't want to get too crazy with that, knowing Tobias from Arrested Development's terrible mixture of therapist and analyst. That said, we're reconvened now with four of us, not just the three of us that people have maybe gotten used to in the last few months. Welcome back, Justin. It's good to see you. Now, dad of Oliver.
Mhm.
And now we have two fathers on the show and one possible father to be, uh, uh, you know, God willing. And so we're talking today about the first five cantos of 46 cantos of Orlando Furioso, 16th century epic poem in ottava rima by the Italian poet Ariosto. I forget his first name.
Vico, little Vico.
Of course.
Ludovico.
One of those names that you always say the last one of, like Shakespeare, though I think everybody knows William. But one of the lesser known epic poets, a romantic epic poet, and one that we chose to read instead of Gargantua and Pantagruel, though I really hope that we read that down the line. That said, having chosen to read this and knowing its influence on books that I know we all love, like Don Quixote, I hope that we'll also get to read The Fairy Queen after this, and maybe even Jerusalem Delivered by Torquato Tasso, just if we get a taste for romantic epic. That said, I noticed a lot of resonances with Dante, even in the language and in the metaphors, but I really wanted to just open the discussion, which I guess is going to be a little bit shorter than our usual discussions. So just a taste of things to come, as Shang Tsung would say, from the first Mortal Kombat movie and the only good Mortal Kombat movie, and one I do think is a good movie. And I hope Justin agrees with me. Like I think
The only one I've ever seen.
yeah, well, good. There you go. You choose with your feet. But this is an interesting choice for us to read. It's also around 1,600 pages, very famously translated by Barbara Reynolds, who herself was a friend of Dorothy Sayers, both great Italianists who translated Dante as well and wrote on Dante. And so, what I guess if I were to ask one question and to immediately contradict myself, it would be, do you think that does this remind you more of Lord Byron or Lawrence Stern? Almost certainly knowing the answer. And I know, Justin, that it kind of excludes you, but I would say that I think, just to reframe the question as a position, that this author is almost like the opposite of a Dostoevsky in terms of gravity. Um,
Well, yeah, after all the Dostoevsky that we read, it's definitely a change of pace for sure. I've not read the second writer you mentioned, but I have read a little bit of Byron, so I can see I can see some connection there for sure.
One
Yeah,
something about Tristram Shandy that we talked about was like the first six books of it seemed really jolly, and then he gets sick, and then his character gets sick for like a book and a half, and then it ends really strong. But something really interesting about the book is that it's this author who's just in command and really enjoys making us laugh. And this does not seem like this seems a lot more like Don Quixote than it does like the Iliad, for example.
yeah. I thought that it opened with a very clear Iliad thing going on, though, right? With the woman that two people want, right? So
Yeah.
in that basic like dilemma, and it turns out way more than two people want this woman,
Right.
but two's enough, right? Two will tango, and they do, all right. And so then it's sort of like that's the source of the initial action, at least. Uh, I don't know if there's a major um, particular epic uh, like side what's the word, like genre, subgenre, or something that we're really in here, or if it's more of like I'm just going to pull things from all over the place, and mash them all together. Um, I really enjoy it so far. I like how we sort of jump from character to character. Um, but yeah, I don't know quite how to compare it to. You know, Obviously there's some connection with what Byron's up to later on. Writing a comic version of this sort of epic. There's some connection to novels in that we get to talk about contemporary events, sort of by the way, by comparison with what's going on in the course of the story, right? Um, but yeah, he definitely is interested in just good old fashioned epic warfare, love affairs, high politics, and then random magical stuff happens too. And a lot of times it's the religious characters doing it, right? Conjuring up spirits using books or something. I don't know what they're doing. It's fun though.
Uh, Wes, I had the same question. Like, opens with this kind of initial problem of Orlando's uh, unrequited love for Angelica, which I think in the previous book flipped, right? She loved him and he spurned her or rejected her or ignored her or something like this.
Orlando
Um,
Caporato.
yeah,
Boy,
which was not written by Ariosto, right? Written by another poet.
Boyar,
Um, who? What's the name?
Boyardo is his last name.
Jeff Boyardo.
Who's a character in this, right? Or
Jeff
maybe
Boyardo.
maybe is not the same, not just another name, similar name.
Yeah, there's a
Um,
horse Boyard.
that's
Yeah,
it. That's right. That's right. The horse. Um, but so Wes, how you point out that it's like, okay, it opens with this kind of problem, but then there's no sort of cohesive narrative, at least yet, right? I mean, I think at some point there might be some references to Orlando, but that's not really the project of this book. This book is, as you said, sort of it's honestly, Justin, I feel like the way that you're saying you're reading it to your son, your infant son, is actually what it's for. It's like for story time.
sure.
Um,
I can see that.
like there's not really this would be a very easy book to pick up a chapter and read it and then not read it for like 3 weeks and then read another chapter because you don't really need to know what happened in the previous sections.
Sure. I
And and in some ways it feels like it's like not fan fiction, but like somebody doing a version of Tolkien where they're like gonna go through and describe all the characters with one little story that happens to them, but they're lesser known characters. Or maybe like was that book that show House of Dragons is based on Fire and Blood? It's like almost an encyclopedia. This feels a little bit more like that than an actual through narrative. I mean, each episode I enjoy, but um, when the initial problem is presented and I kind of read a summary of like what the book's about, like I'm really excited about this kind of overall epic narrative. And so far I've not gotten much of that. But
Well, part of this is it's a Renaissance epic, and so embellishment is part of the beauty of the time. But there are three, and Barbara Reynolds points this out, but there are three major threads in there. The Carolingian, which is the actual time at which it's set, which is several hundred years prior to when it was written, which is like the Iliad, and which is set several hundred years prior to when Homer lived, with the time of Charlemagne. And so the battle is like this battle of Paris. That's like the actual action. And then all this other stuff is just gnarly stuff that's going on to the side of it. And so yes, you can see where Game of Thrones and where where J.R.R. Tolkien and where like RPGs got that sort of ramifying, branching off of the main narrative thing. But it does have that. There's also an epic list of a lineage establishing divine heritage. There's a battle between cultures. So like it's between like Asia and Europe in the Iliad. Here it's between the Christians and the so-called Saracens and Moors, and also Asians. Though in this translation, it's old. As it's written, they're called Orientals in the table of contents, which I think shows you part of the funniness or the humor of Don Quixote, because we have several named horses, not just one. Rosinante. We have a magical shield, a magical ring. I think you see the Hobbit, but also that can come from Ring of Gyges. That's an old motif. There are named swords as well. And so this is and there's also a hypocrite. And so you see Harry Potter here. You see a lot of the nature of like EverQuest and RPGs, but also the Hobbit sort of universe, Lord of the Rings. But the epic, I think, comes from the fact that war is at the core of it. It's between the top people in the world who are basically the children of the gods and are endowed with like even named objects of valor. And I think that's sort of an element that we haven't read together. That comes from sort of the Arthurian magical medieval tradition, that there are named swords, thoughtful horses, even though that's also Greek. And that going into the woods equals fighting a knight, finding a lady beset by rogues. I mean, this is what Don Quixote lampoons. This is what he expects to happen when he goes out. He expects Orlando Furioso to happen. And you can see how it's in some ways what I think some of my colleagues might call like a male fantasy. Like you go out and it's like this virtual reality that's really adventurous and fun. And like you save a damsel and then you find out that this guy is going to attack this other guy under unjust pretenses and you stop that and that's great. And then they see that you're actually a great hero too and the king is very happy to meet you and that's it you you can see how many genres of adventure sort of romance come and media come from the archetype that this book I think is nailed or this poem is nailed. I would also add that it's got a static rhyme and what like a poem meter, right? It's hendecasyllabic. There are 8 lines per stanza. It's called ottava rima, and so even though he's having a lot of fun with it, and I think taking tremendous liberties like Lord Stern, he is adhering to certain conventions that would make this technically epic. Even though right, like I don't think he's setting out necessarily to describe an Achilles. I mean, Orlando is going to lose his mind. That's the whole idea. Orlando frenzied. Furioso doesn't mean like just like upset or like angry, like frenzy.
Yeah. I mean, he goes on a like. So we haven't seen him except for the very, very beginning, but he goes on a. What's that?
And a lie about seeing him by a sprite.
Right. Yes. Exactly. But he is going to travel across Europe doing all kinds of crazy stuff. So to like, I think that there's a lot here to help understand to your point of like future reference points for not just literature, not just the arts, not just even to be honest, like philosophy and thinking about ourselves, but media in general, style, etc. But I mean, you can get into meta commentaries about the idea of the premise is the unifying of Europe under one cultural ideology and also forcing or not forcing but facing this opposing force of the Saracen who is also becoming married into the culture of Europe as well. So it's like a joining of those two things while maintaining this very rigid structure. So it's like the symbolic element, the symbolic read of the text itself is as a tool by which other cultures can become part of the European cultural story. Does that make sense? Is that too big for me to say that? I mean, we're pretty early on, obviously.
No, but is Europe going to lose its mind trying to pursue something beautiful that keeps escaping it, right? I
Yeah.
mean, there's also, I mean, it's a male fantasy in a way, or maybe that's what some would say, but there's also like a very strong female character who's a quasi main character at this stage of the story, right? Bradamante is pursuing her, divinely ordained husband and rescuing him from the evil sorcerer, right? And so there's some comments also about this law in Scotland, which is very harsh on women. And the brother of Bradamante, right, ends up there. I think it's him, right? And he's like, "That's a stupid law. Why is it so harsh against people, having love affairs? That's dumb, right?" So there's really strong tensions, yeah, like at play within the the attempt to harmonize the culture or something. And there's really clear ways in which it could like totally explode. And so it's far from stable. But
Yeah.
I like the allegorical read. Yeah, I think it's interesting.
And you're making me think about the idea of, or, yeah, that like this is the project is Orlando as the main hero, the protagonist who has this idealized version of the world, is going crazy, running around Europe trying to, I don't know, avenge or tell everybody that he's been wronged, and yet all the other characters seem to solve their problems fairly not conventionally, but quickly. Like in each, can't. I mean, I'm not saying everything is resolved quickly, these other characters are going to end up married to each other. Like they're gonna solve these quandaries. Um, yeah.
I
Yes.
think I think I misspoke too. It's not it's Reynaldo, right, who ends up in Scotland, not Ruggiero. Ruggiero, we don't know
Yes.
where he went. He flew off on the horse. Sorry, yeah, I got
Yes.
those two mixed up.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's hard to keep track. Sorry, just yeah, interject. Go ahead.
Um, but it's interesting. Your read on it, Babcock, reminds me of what I might almost think is a Justin Brown sort of Nietzschean read on this. That almost there's this battle between cultures happening, and that this is in some ways kind of the most appropriate possible thing, and therefore the best possible thing to write about. That when there are such characters in the world that are, and such things come to be as magical shields and hippogriffs and sorcerers and magic rings, and even God is listed as a character in the dramatis personae, and several angels, um that it's kind of like that's the world running as it's supposed to, this sort of clash of civilizations sort of notion, not like this sort of bourgeois middle class sort of Aristotelian moderate existence that we've all sort of aimed at, but that you should be jumping on a hippogriff and riding across Europe. I mean, your wits are only so important. Something else I would add that I think is interesting to the Iliadic point is that this Helen-like figure is going to end up marrying a very Menelaus-like guy, not an Orlando, not a Charlemagne. And also to the Iliadic point, Orlando, even though he may be like the protagonist, even though it seems to clearly be Ruggiero or Ronaldo, is not Charlemagne. Like it should be about Charlemagne, right? Sort of like how the Iliad should probably be about Agamemnon. Um, right? He is the king, but that's the whole thing. So here, I guess we know that Charlemagne is going to work out, but also like the Iliad, we know that this guy's going to die. Maybe not in this story, but the whole sort of mythology underlying Roland, who's called Orlando in the Italian, is that he's arrogant and gets outflanked by the Saracens. And if only he blew his horn, he would be saved by Charlemagne, but he's too proud. And so he's sort of like an Ajax, sort of, or Achilles, sort of
You know,
figure.
he makes me think a little bit about Hrothgar and Beowulf. Um,
Yeah,
uh,
or even the character who gets killed right at the end of the Fellowship, Boromir.
Boromir, yeah, sure. Like Boromir, obviously with the horn, that of course tracks. But I was thinking more just in the idea, like, Beowulf heeds Hrothgar, he listens to him, and he changes his ways, etc. But if he doesn't, Hrothgar is Charlemagne, this established ruler, right? I mean, Charlemagne is not, when you're saying that should be the main character, but he already is the king. Like, there's no
Right.
dynamism.
You're right. He is.
Uh,
Yeah, he's an NPC now.
yeah, I mean, and he like, yeah, in no video game do you go in and the king is going to be the interesting character. and often he's the one who needs saving. So he's sort of a pathetic character in that way. Um,
Right, or you have to go through the whole video game to become him.
yeah, exactly right. Yeah, I mean the interesting story is exactly right. Is becoming how you become the king, not being the king,
Right.
unless the king has some sort of dynamic part to him that is still to be seen.
Well, that's
Um,
often when he sort of leaves the royal
yeah,
role,
the downfall.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, the
whatever
downfall.
reason, or like gives it up, or like goes in disguise.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then you get to see him as he really is. Uh,
Yeah,
or
I mean, even in a comedy, it would be, he's trying to marry off his daughter and it would end in a positive way, but he himself is not changing. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
the variation of this with Arthur, right? Arthur's the king. He has his adventures that lead up to that. But then the real interesting part is when Lancelot comes along,
Yeah.
right? And then the love triangle involves the king, right? But Lancelot is the great champion, and so there's that sort of tragic machinery set into motion there. And I mean, it definitely seems like that thread, right? That story tradition is getting drawn on here as well. Like, this kind of superhuman level of jousting and Renaissance warfare and all this stuff. Merlin's cave we've already visited, uh, and we saw a very Aeneid like, procession of
Hmm.
what's going to happen, right? And we're
Mm.
we're very full of praise for all these people who are going to be born, right? And so in that way, it's almost like an inversion of Dante, right? Dante sends all the bad people to hell and tells why they're there, and in this case, we're seeing sprites of all the people who are going to be on Earth and why they're going to be so great. But I think, like, I don't know if we need to know that much about these people. Like, historically, it's obvious that they didn't live up to this because look at the world around us, right? So it's kind of like, yeah. What is the effect of that as his contemporaries are reading this about themselves and thinking, yeah, yeah, am I really that good? Like, I don't know, but it's good poetry for
You
sure.
know that Shakespeare does that in Macbeth. There's when
Yeah, right.
Macbeth wants to see the future, the
Yeah.
witches, the spirits rather show him the procession of all the kings that are going to come leading up to King James. And to your
Yep.
point of like, for Macbeth the character, it's showing him that his actions are going to be fruitless. But for King James, the audience of one, it's to show him like this is who you're supposed to be. You're supposed to be there's a lot going into building you up.
Totally. Yeah. The whole idea of like entertaining the court
Hmm.
definitely seems accurate.
Hmm.
And any elements of like moral teaching, like I found this fascinating. She mentions in the intro that this book is spared the bonfire in Quixote, right? Because it's like
Hmm.
it's got like moral quality to it. I was like, huh, okay. And Spencer says something really similar in the Fairy Queen, right? Like he wants that to be a moral emblem for people to like learn virtues and stuff. Um, I don't think that's how we think about poetry anymore, by and large.
Hmm.
But it definitely has that quality to it, right? Like those are valid virtues that are being celebrated here, and the way in which they're portrayed is very entertaining, and so maybe we tend to listen more. Like I don't know, that's an interesting theory to set aside like the more Aristotelian lecture style philosophy of like how to be a good person or something like that.
but
Or again, the religious theory. Yeah.
like almost platonically to represents an aspirational way of existence, almost as if it is entertaining to see people behaving in this makes me think of Parks the show in a way that is morally excellent, but because of that, it makes it entertaining. I was going to ask whether you got that feeling, very different from any of the modernist or postmodernist stuff we've read together, that these characters are sort of justice does seem to prevail. And even when there's deceit, often it's for a good reason. And often it is found out. Though sometimes it continues to win out, like with the Hippogriff and Ruggiero when he gets saved for 5 seconds and but then oh no, the guy who swore to protect him against fate has stolen him again because I guess he's going to have a tragic fate. And so too bad for him, the man of Baghdad. But uh,
There's not a lot of cynicism.
no, right, exactly. There's a lot of and so I suggested the Nietzschean read that I called the Justin Brown Nietzschean read, but really it's my own. But I it is almost as if I'm reading not necessarily the Iliad, where I do think that cynicism finds its way in, but like a mixture of Tristram Shandy and the Iliad, where right, like this is a world very different from Game of Thrones, much more similar to The Hobbit, where much more similar to Star Wars even, where good seems to even perforate the evil and the bad. And there does seem to be more moral relativism, not in that morals are relative, but that people are acting from different angles and across intentions with each other. And so even though they might have personally good intentions and be good and noble characters, they find themselves at odds with these other characters that they find themselves oblique to. And so that and even right before we came on, the end of Canto 5 is somebody figuring out that there's a fight going on that doesn't need to happen between people that are fighting under false pretense, but both with noble intention. And so I I do find that sort of invigorating to read, especially having read lots of boring scholarship and interesting scholarship, but also lots of modernist stuff, postmodern stuff that is not attempting to be moral literature, as it were. I don't
You
find
know,
it dusty.
you don't know what?
I don't find it dusty or smacking of the classroom.
No, but it does feel, again, this is only five cantos in. It does feel, which is also not to say that it's bad in any way, but it does feel like the literature of, a just prepubescent boy who has not seen actual battle, tragedy, hardship, etc., right? It's like this is what the Starks were reading. This is what Bran Stark was reading
Right.
just before episode
Got
one of the
thrown
of the
off
series
yeah,
begins.
right. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, like
Well,
it's
that's why it
it.
has the idealistic feel that you had
Yeah,
talked about
yeah,
earlier, and why
yeah,
it tracks so easily to like an RPG video game. In the
yeah.
beginning, like you're going to wander into the woods and you're going to find all these different knights and a girl. There's a fancifulness to that. Um, and then, of course, the stories go off, and you might have one conversation, and someone joins your party in the game, but you never talk to them again. Like
Yeah.
just
right.
episode, and that I think that's what makes it joyous. It doesn't have the cynicism, but it's not lacking in some realism, or at least the way we would want it to be.
But it is, and again, this is not like the word I'm using would be critical, but I'm not. It's not to be critical, but it is immature in a certain way, right? Like, and like I think Don Quixote is like a perfect counter example to this idea of like, and even so when you say Tristram Shandy, it's not his sort of innocent way and positive way of looking at Uncle Toby, um and but it's not Don Quixote's way of seeing the world that is clearly flawed and yet ennobling in its flaws. This is ennobling in its own self. Like he's the good characters are good because they're trying to achieve goodness, and that's it.
Yeah. Well, it's an enchanted world, you know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
The,
yeah, yeah,
the, the
yeah.
world itself bends around backwards to make weird and wonderful things happen for everybody at all times, And yeah, we haven't seen anything truly terrible or tragic just yet. And it seems like if it does happen, it's still within the framework of a divine providence that's working
Yeah.
towards ultimate, yeah, goodness for everybody.
That's
There's
interesting.
a line in The Importance of Being Earnest where the two female characters are talking about not the two main female characters, Miss Prism, her teacher, and then Cecily are talking about fiction, and Miss Prism says, That is what fiction means. The good ends well and the bad ends poorly. And this fits into that kind of idea.
And maybe that's part of the neoclassical idea as well. But that's interesting. You made me think also of how this is similar to Sir Gawain, and that this is like a young court. That this is not like the adaptation of Gawain, where Arthur is very old, but where idealism can still sort of reign here in this enchanted world, where people are described as being absconded with by a hippogriff, but then they have their own rooms, which are much nicer than the ground that they find themselves on when they're saved. And so it's like there are no consequences. And so so it will be very interesting when there are consequences and for whom. But
has anyone seen real just I know you're about to sign off, I know you got to go. Has anyone seen the film The Duel? It's or The Last Duel, I think it's Ridley Scott directed it. It's Matt Damon, Ben Affleck, and I don't remember the third
Adam Driver.
guy. Adam Driver, yeah. And it's a medieval duel over a woman who's been wronged, and you see it from three different perspectives.
It's very Rashomon.
Yeah, Rashomon, exactly right. Yeah. And I think that the different angles of existence that we're talking about, the way that these texts see the world or present the world, I think are presented in this one film. So it's kind of interesting.
It's a youthful, anything is possible view of the world.
That's one, and then you see these other versions of the story that depict it in a much different way.
I meant that's the way.
Oh, this one for sure. Yes.
All right. Excellent.
All right.
Okay, well, gentlemen, I do have to run. Next time we'll have more time and probably another 5 cantos, but we'll talk about that in text. It's great to see you again, Justin. Congratulations.
Thank you.
All of you gentlemen, and see you soon.
Adios.
Later.